2009 saw the release of one of the most underappreciated science fiction horror stories of the past, well, ever. As I mentioned in my review of Nemesis, science fiction horror is cursed by the presence of a pivotal classic that every subsequent film has been accused of ripping off. As a result, these creative tales of terror have often been ignored, and Pandorum is no exception. Imagine my surprise in 2018, years after the film failed to generate buzz outside of the fanatical cult that did eventually form, when a game appeared on Kickstarter sharing the same unique name. Count me in. Hello? Yeah. I'm recording it right now. What? What do you mean it's not based on the movie? It has to be. It's totally based on the... Are you sure? Really? Yeah? That's weird. Okay, thanks. Oh, crap. Okay, let's start over. This is Pandorum, a board game that is in no way related to the movie that shares its name. And before you check, I did it for you. No, it's not a real word. Checked every finder and dictionary online. The word was created by the film as a nickname of a fictional psychosis known as orbital dysfunctional syndrome, the result of long-term exposure to deep space and triggered by emotional stress leading to severe paranoia, delirium, psychosis, and fodder for science fiction horror movies. There is no other entry. It was invented by the film and ripped off for the board game. I guess they're lucky the movie wasn't successful, otherwise it would be like naming your game The Pirates of the Caribbean or Harry Potter. The latter being ironic considering the main character in the 1986 comedy horror film Troll is named Harry Potter. I know. Weird, isn't it? In the game, it refers to the planet mankind colonizes. I was looking for connecting threads. The movie tells the story of the Elysium and its hibernating crew of 60,000 refugees on a 123-year journey to the planet Tanis, the only habitable nearby world after Earth, already suffering overpopulation and rampant climate collapse, is destroyed by an unknown event. It would have been really cool if the planet in the game matched that of the movie, but no, just took the name. And full disclosure, I knew that going into the campaign. I just wanted another opportunity to praise the film and confirm to those wondering that there was in fact no connection between the two. Thankfully, Pandorum is a science fiction board game, one blessed with astounding production quality. This is why I back Kickstarter, small companies with a lot of dreams. This game shares a level of overproduction with titles like Grim Forest and Gia, thick boards, dense tokens. Like, these may not be metal, but I've never punched tokens that came out this smoothly before. Each player receives a harvester miniature as well as color match bases and modules, which the game simply calls objects. The artwork is fantastic. Check this out. Each player builds a harvester assembled from random aft and bow sections. Each section features its own unique power, enabling numerous asymmetric combinations, but the real dazzler is the fact that each section is illustrated differently so that each harvester looks different. They did not need to do that. Likewise with the board. Instead of unfolding a fixed arrangement, players lay out a random combination of segments, resulting in, supposedly, 2,000 different board combinations. Once you figure out how they're supposed to fit. Wait. Right. There you go. No doubt, this game looks top-notch. The writing, on the other hand. The setting, in the distant future, involves corporations competing for colony rights on new worlds, and Pandorum is only the latest to be carved up by nameless groups. Unlike terraforming Mars, in Pandorum everything occurs on planet, with little influence coming from space, offering the impression that ships traveling intergalactic distances are now bound to hover across the surface. It all kind of feels off thematically. What I prefer to think, possibly inspired by the movie, is that a singular colony ship waits in orbit, and instead of corporations, colony factions are given the task to establish, hopefully, a productive infrastructure. To the winner come the bragging rights. And that's all, as the exploitation of the planet by the human race is all that truly matters. I elected to endorse this interpretation as the book does little to explain its setting, which is often an expectation in a highly thematic game such as this. Admittedly, minor criticism, as I wanted to get that out of the way before discussing how genuinely awful this rulebook actually is. Let me read you from the first page of this manual. The player's goal is become to the richest man in the galaxy, therefore to accumulate more quids than the other players by the end of the game. You will get quids by playing some cards and by constructing of the objects. There is two types of the objects in the game: bases and modules. I'm not kidding. The whole of the book is riddled with writing like that, proving the manual is written by someone with only a partial grasp of English, or is written in a foreign language and then run through an automatic translator. What's weirder is that online, there's an older version of the manual with less content that is surprisingly better written. It's from January 2018, so obviously the print edition from 2019 I have in my hand is newer. Thankfully, the game is simple enough and with enough pictures that the game was comfortable to learn. Firstly, after figuring out the planet's configuration, assign one bow and one harvester to each player. Flip to the side determined by player count. Each player gets a harvester as well as bases and modules of the same color. The ration of the last two is based on player count. I'm demonstrating with 2 players, so each one of us receives 12 modules and 6 bases. If it were 4 players, those values would be reduced to 6 and 3 respectively. Each player also gets a satellite card denoting a symbol that will earn you extra points. You keep that face down and private. Oh yeah, you noticed, yeah. It fits perfectly in your harvester map to form an image. Told you the production quality was astounding. Each player also receives 3 universal starting extraction cards denoted by this symbol, as well as 1 from the shuffled deck of regular extraction cards. Lay out 4 more to form a market flop. All cards must be different, so if you draw a duplicate, stack them atop each other and draw another until you have 4 unique cards. Back to the map, place these volcanoes on the red hexes. They're impassable. Place all the harvesters in the central location. Place the moon of Pandorum nearby, and then forget about it, as you'll probably never go there. Despite the effort placed into production, the gameplay is relatively simple. You must discard a card from your hand to the market flop, over top of identical cards if necessary, likely expanding the market over 4 to move along any straight line without crossing a volcano. The destination is dependent on several factors. If you already possess a base or module, you can stop there and end your turn. If occupying another player's spot, you must pay that player 1 quid for landing on the module, 2 for a base, similarly ending your turn. If unoccupied, you must play between 1 and 2 cards with a matching symbol on the hex. Place either a module or a base, respectively, and potentially score points. This is the definitive rule. You cannot move onto an empty hex without playing matching cards and placing an object. A lot of cards feature universal symbols, so they can be placed anywhere, but some require specific locations or locations adjacent to volcanoes. If you play 1 card, gain the points and place a module. If you play 2 cards, earn the points for both and place a base. Some of these cards list conditions of varying complexity. Some award points based on adjacent terrain, others based on the location of your own bases, and so forth. Points awarded double as the game's currency, quid, which you always acquire as you deploy bases. The cards you spend when deploying cards are not lost. Instead, you place them in one of your 3 spots under your harvester pad. The first location is an activatable ability. Place 3 cards when playing with 2 players, and when full, discard those to activate that ability. The middle spot, requiring 5 cards when playing 2 players, is a permanent ability, which is a mandatory early goal as it dramatically increases your power for the duration of the game. I'm not kidding. This is the initial priority, as the unlocked ability is passive and permanent and affects how you play the rest of the game more so than the corporations do in Terraforming Mars. The last position is the cargo bay. These cards remain for the game and award points based on who has the most of each type of extraction card. For example, if you have 5 laboratories and 3 generators, and your opponent has 4 generators and 2 laboratories, you will receive 5 points, and your opponent will receive 4. This is a gross simplification of this step, as you may have dozens of cards in the stack by the end of a 2-player game. Moving and deploying modules and bases is the main brunt of the game. If you can't or don't want to move in place, a common occurrence as moving and playing cards empties your hand, you can elect to draw any combination of 2 cards either from the market or from the draw deck, refilling immediately the market thereafter. And shockingly enough, that is the entirety of Pandorum. Once a player places his last object, whether that be a base or a module, the endgame is triggered, and each player has an equal number of turns. The player with the most quid wins. The acquired tokens may not decide it though. Remember, I mentioned the cargo bay and the up to 5 points you receive for your satellite. The one rule my fiancé couldn't get over was the discarding of a perfectly good card in order to move in a straight line in any distance. But I had no problem with it. But I will admit a substantial level of analysis paralysis as you balance the cards in your hand to maximize the points in your turn. I also love the asymmetric nature of the player boards, but will criticize the power level of the slot 2 center abilities. These are so extremely powerful. I cannot imagine they are all equal in their effectiveness. This one, for example, the Photonic Drive, claims you pay 1 less for movement, basically offering free movement while on Pandorum, meaning you never need to sacrifice cards to move, resulting in a rapid deployment of bases far faster than anyone else. It becomes a race to deploy bases before this player ends the game, and it's required, as this other ability, the Recycling Bay, gives you the capability to place discarded movement cards on your Harvester pad, which is crazy. Yes, you still need to send cards to move, unlike the previous player, but every card you play gives you points. The first time I played with this ability, I scored 30 extra points from just my cargo bay, winning the game handedly. But when I played the game with the exact configuration later, I was trounced by the player with the Photonic Drive as they developed their last object with me 5 objects behind. The solar panel is almost as powerful, allowing you to draw 3 cards from the market instead of 2, as is the Archiver, which enables you to draw an extra card from the deck when you do anything but deploy an object. Then there is the Reactive Armor, which allows you to ignore volcanoes. Like I said, I don't believe these are all balanced. As said, these slot 2 abilities are powerful, so much so that the slot 1 abilities barely get used. Combine it with the Recycling Bay and you'd be stupid to sacrifice cards to anywhere else. Now, having said that, I find Pandorum fun. Despite assumed winning strategies, you may end up mixed up or trapped in areas that don't give you a lot of points. There's a lot of strategy with the random elements of the game affecting choice but not success. When you win, you actually think you earned it. As for replayability, I mentioned the randomized hex map but didn't mention the moon. It requires 2 cards to move there to any square and then 2 cards to move back to any square. Although I can see this being of use in a 4-player game, it never gets seen at 2. The other significant addition is the mini expansion included, Discovery. Lay out the mini board, place the respective shuffled deck atop, and lay out the random monoliths in such a way as to prevent a player from reaching them on the first turn. The moment a player does land on one, draw the top monolith card. It can result in a global event or an ability you can activate when you wish. You can also take the monolith if you want. I mean, it doesn't do anything, right? Or not, maybe just put it back, like right where you left it. Better leave things untouched. You draw the first event when the first object is placed and another when all players have placed something. These events supply a pool of additional quid, which can be claimed if you carry the action on the card. There are other various events, including an earthquake, a weird contamination, a sandstorm. Not that kind of sandstorm. And an ancient civilization. where a volcano is revealed to have a no, just no. No, we shouldn't be on this planet. This is not a good idea. I can see how this ends. It is weird that a game paying homage to 2001 Alien and Pandorum employs an area control mechanic. Each time an event runs out of quid or its prerequisites are fulfilled, the event is discarded and replaced. Unlike most area control games I've played, which often limit resources, player meeples, and the accessible map, Pandorum does the opposite. The map is never reduced and player meeples are increased, with each player in a 2-player game gaining access to the same amount of endpoints as 4 players. There's a large deck of cards and an ample amount of tokens, but you will go through all of these regardless of player count. In a 4-player game, a winner may score 50 points with a dozen cards in his or her cargo bay, but in a 2-player game, the winner may score more than 120 points with as many as 40 cards in his or her bay. It makes you think the game is broken as you exhaust a game of supplies in a 2-player game. Just know that as the player count increases, the time each player enjoys reduces drastically. A 4-player game won't run that much longer than a 2-player game because each player will be playing the game for half as long. This also means it'll take a lot longer to place your cards in the middle slot, which is why in a 4-player game, these requirements are reduced. Pandorum is obviously a work of love, and I'm happy to have been one of the original Kickstarter bakers. Really? Bakers? Couldn't even get that right. Regardless, Pandorum is a good game. The variety allows you to configure the game how you wish to play, however you want, with or without strange foreboding alien artifacts, with or without the nearly useless moon. The game even suggests removing the system cards if you want to reduce the amount of take that in the game, and having done so, I will admit it does not reduce enjoyment in any way, and will be the preferred playstyle going forward. The art style is fantastic, and I will admit a strange admiration for it being a competitive area control game in a dark space horror setting. The look of the cards, the ships, this is an ominous setting where monsters may erupt at any moment. Why do I get the impression it's also playing homage to Dead Space as well, as greedy mining corporations are diddling around where they're not supposed to be? It would be more interesting if Pandorum were the psychological syndrome from the film, and the planet was Tanis, and it told the story of the colonists competing for resources on a new foreboding world, one already haunted by the ghosts of a long-dead alien civilization. The board game is begging for more story-based elements, but outside of a solo mode, there really isn't any substance below the surface of Pandorum. Oh, right, solo mode. It really isn't anything special. Maximus, the name of the AI player, gains its own ship configuration and satellite topper. Place several objects above based on difficulty. Maximus is very aggressive, always wanting to drop an object adjacent to you. If it can't, it'll move randomly based on its own deck of cards. It will also draw cards and gain points. The object is to place down all of your objects before Maximus places all of its and end the game with more points. Easy enough. Pandorum is a simple formula wrapped in an awesome production. I'll give Pandorum 7.5 out of 10. If you work around the translation issues, it isn't difficult to learn, and I quite enjoyed it. Just a shame I'll never get the Pandorum board game I really want. This is Chris from Deus Ex Machina.